Around 1200 BCE, a sophisticated network of civilizations stretching from Greece to Egypt simply shattered. Within a few decades, thriving kingdoms fell one by one, bringing an abrupt end to centuries of cultural and economic brilliance. Rewind to 1350 BCE, and the map looks different. The region was dominated by the Club of Great Powers: Egyptians, Hittites, Mycenaeans, Babylonians, and Assyrians. These empires were bound together by trade routes that functioned like modern global supply chains. We know how close they were because they left a clay paper trail. Cuneiform tablets, like the Amarna letters, record a brotherhood of kings who constantly negotiated treaties, arranged marriages, and traded massive shipments of gold and luxury goods. This massive international trade was managed through rigid palace economies. Wealth and resources were funneled directly into centralized bureaucracies, which then redistributed goods according to the desires of a highly concentrated elite. Because every major state relied on this exact same rigid system, they became deeply interdependent. They built a world of immense wealth, but one so thoroughly tangled together that a disruption in one province could easily starve a capital thousands of miles away. The entire era was built on bronze, the foundational material for weapons, armor, and tools. But creating bronze requires two metals that are almost never found together: copper and tin. The copper came primarily from the island of Cyprus, which operated as a massive industrialized mining hub. It was shipped across the sea in heavy, standardized units known as oxhide ingots. Tin, however, was the crude oil of the ancient world. It was rare, highly strategic, and had to be hauled by donkey caravan from mines as far away as modern-day Afghanistan, crossing treacherous mountain passes and rival territories. When diplomatic relations broke down, these vital supply lines were instantly weaponized. From their fortified capital at Hattusa, the Hittites drafted treaties that explicitly banned any ships from trading with their Mycenaean rivals, cutting off essential metals. These palace economies had evolved into something resembling our modern just-in-time supply chains. They relied on a continuous flow of both military metals and food. If a trade route was blocked, an empire faced immediate starvation and absolute defenselessness. Right around 1200 BCE, Egyptian records describe a terrifying new threat arriving from the Mediterranean, a mysterious coalition they called the Sea Peoples. Carvings on the temple walls at Medinet Habu show Ramses III's archers fighting off these invaders. But if you look closely, the Sea Peoples traveled with women, children, and ox carts. They were desperate migrants fleeing their crumbling homelands. Egypt repelled the invasion, but the immense cost of the war broke the empire's strength. The pharaohs survived, but they permanently lost their imperial reach and began a slow decline. Further up the coast, the wealthy merchant city of Ugarit met a worse fate. Clay tablets recovered from the ruins capture the panic of the city's final days, with officials begging foreign kings for emergency grain shipments to save their citizens from starving. The archaeological record confirms the violence of this collapse. At nearby harbor sites like Tel Twini, excavations reveal thick layers of ash, collapsed walls, and scattered bronze arrowheads embedded in the ruins. These sea peoples were a visible symptom of a regional system already pushed to its breaking point. They applied the final, fatal pressure to cities that were already starving and economically strangled. While raiders attacked from the sea, the empires were also rotting from within. As the centralized palace elites squeezed the peasant classes for more resources during hard times, internal rebellions and class warfare began tearing cities apart. To make matters worse, the Mediterranean sits on a highly active fault system. Geologists found evidence of a 50-year sequence of major earthquakes striking Greece, Anatolia, and the Levant right at this exact time, repeatedly leveling city infrastructure. Battered by seismic disasters, cut off from trade, and unable to feed its population, the mighty Hittite Empire disintegrated. Its capital was abandoned, and its central authority vanished from the map. With the great protector states gone, the smaller vassal kingdoms that relied on them for military backing were left completely exposed. Without the imperial armies to maintain order, local warlords and pirate fleets picked off the remaining coastal cities. This convergence of seismic shocks, internal revolt, and economic strangulation overwhelmed the system's capacity to recover. The late Bronze Age network was simply too brittle to absorb so many simultaneous failures. For decades, historians debated what could have caused the massive food shortages that originally set the Sea Peoples in motion and weakened the empires. This chart maps precipitation levels in the ancient Mediterranean. By studying sediment cores from ancient lakes, paleoclimatologists tracked exact rainfall. Around 1200 BCE, the region entered a 3-century-long megadrought. This sustained drop lines up precisely with historical crop failures and the abandonment of key cities. This sustained climate shift turned once lush agricultural centers into arid landscapes, unable to support large populations. Without food, the highly centralized economies stopped working, forcing massive numbers of people to migrate just to survive. A massive environmental shift catalyzed the entire collapse. The violent invasions and city destructions recorded in the texts were the desperate reactions to a landscape that could no longer support human life. What followed was a multi-century dark age. Populations plummeted, monumental building projects ceased, and the complex writing systems used by the palace bureaucrats were entirely forgotten. With international trade routes dead, the supply of tin vanished, making bronze impossible to produce on a large scale. Blacksmiths were forced to adapt, learning to forge a locally available, harder-to-work metal, dragging humanity into the Iron Age. The collapse of the superpowers also created a blank slate. In the power vacuum left by the Hittites and Egyptians, smaller, agile societies like the Phoenicians and Israelites were able to emerge, establish new trade networks, and shape the next era of history. We live in a world bound together by the same mechanics. We rely on rare materials mined halfway across the globe, transported along fragile maritime choke points, to sustain populations that cannot feed or equip themselves independently. The ruins of Ugarit and Hattusa offer a stark warning. A highly interconnected world generates spectacular wealth and technological progress, but that same complexity ensures that when the system finally fails, the collapse is total.